My entire career so far, I have been wondering what goes on at a plating facility. Someplace like Millennium or Powersports or Umatech. I'm familiar with machining and tool and die and stuff like that. I got a lathe and a milling machine, and I've spent lots of time in shops like that. The guys that do the plating, are they chemists? Are they tool and die makers? Are these like super advanced shops? Are these old school guys just getting her done? It seems like it's been very difficult to get information about what happens inside a plating facility. Well, I just got back. I spent a few days in Vancouver, and while I was there, I got to stop in at the former Mongoose machine, currently Powersports Engine Solutions, and I got to walk around in the shop. I got to put my hands on the machines. I got to ask the guys whatever questions I wanted. I basically got a full tour of the entire facility. If you want to know what goes on inside a plating facility, that's what this video is about. Hey there, dirt bike people. I'm Chuck from TrueTech, and today I'm here at Powersports Engine Solutions, and this is Dana Kirby. This is Lucas. We're gonna go through some of the machines that they have here. They do Nikasil plating here, honing, all kinds of engine machining. This is a crazy shop, and we're gonna go through a whole bunch of neat stuff. We'll see what happens.
Okay, this is RZR 900 cylinder. So this has Nikasil that's in good shape. However, we're gonna put some forged pistons in. So we're gonna put some Wasner pistons. That means we're gonna take off an additional thou off the Nikasil to make the extra room for the forged pistons that expand more. We're gonna diamond hone it. These are diamond blades. Only diamonds can cut Nikasil. So if you have just a stone hone, you're never gonna cut it properly. A lot of people use the stone hones, but all you're doing is cutting the nickel. You're not cutting the silicone carbide. So it might look like it's a crosshatch, but it's actually very bad. You need diamonds to cut it. So we're gonna take off a thou, make some extra room for forged pistons so that this motor is reliable.
So full disclosure, when I have a Nikasil cylinder on the bench and I put a hone through it, it looks to me, just like what you said, it looks to me like it has crosshatch. I'm also one of those guys that learned from an old guy. I have never seen how the Nikasil process was done, and I've never seen how a Nikasil cylinder gets honed. Also, interesting, I have a book, it's a catalog from Goodson, and in that catalog, I can buy hone stones that are aluminum oxide, that are specifically made, that they're marketed as for Nikasil. What's going on there?
Well, that's an interesting question. This is really stirring the pot now. Okay, Chuck, I'm gonna give you an answer based on my understanding and experience. Nikasil carbide, or Nikasil is actually one of the hardest substances in the world. You need diamonds to cut it. It's a 90 or 95.
That's Rockwell?
Rockwell, correct. So what that means is if you're putting a stone hone in there, all you're cutting is the nickel. So what it is, it's silicone carbide and nickel in one. It's extremely porous. It is the most mountainous under a microscope that you'll ever see because it retains the oil, but it's extremely hard. So you have mountain peaks of nickel and you have mountain peaks of silicone carbide. So if you put a stone hone through there, all you're doing is cutting down the peaks and valleys of the nickel, which is soft. You're not cutting the silicone carbide.
Oh,
that's my understanding, Chuck, but I never put it under a microscope, even though we deal with it every day. But you brought up a thing that they have these new stones that are out that they claim they can cut Nikasil. I don't have an answer because I don't know what they're made of, and I don't know if it's hard enough to cut a 90 or 95 hardness. I can't answer that.
Now, what I can say, looking at some of the new cylinders that you guys have plated here, when I hone Nikasil or deglaze, whatever you want to call it, when I look at your cylinder, or a new cylinder when it comes to me after being plated, the crosshatch in it is very fine. The crosshatch that I see when I throw a cheapy hone through it, it's definitely more coarse.
Well, as we talked about, you have different peaks and valleys, and you're just cutting the nickel. So you're going to see if you're taking out the soft mountains and you're leaving the hard mountains, you're going to see bigger gaps. So
that makes sense.
So you truly need diamond to properly cut Nikasil so that you get a fine crosshatch and it's perfect. It's the only way.
I have another question. One of the reasons why I like to throw a stone through a Nikasil cylinder when I get it is because when I take an engine apart, the Nikasil is smooth in some spots and rough in other spots, and sometimes you'll get aluminum showing through. It's hard to tell the condition of the cylinder, but as soon as I throw a hone through it, it immediately shows me the high spots and low spots and some of the, it helps me to see what I'm dealing with. What do you think of that?
100%. You can't see anywhere visually until you hone it first, and that's going to show you. Mm-hmm. Now, as for fixing those high and low spots, the only proper way to do it is not just with a hone, and even if you're in a press or by hand. The only proper way is with a CNC machine like this that will actually find the high spots, fix the taper, fix the other round. So it's computerized. It knows where the high spots are and the low spots, and the CNC machine will fix it. So we always say, we have a CNC diamond honer to make sure that all those pits and valleys are perfectly straightened out after. These diamond stones, I can take off a half thou in about 30 seconds of honing.
Wow.
If I go a minute, we can take a thou off with good pressure.
Really careful.
Very careful, very careful. Now, a lot of people say they take Scotch-Brite,
Yeah.
which is fine. I mean, you're basically putting some pits and valleys, take off the shine to hold some oil. That's going to help. I mean, you don't have to CNC diamond hone every Nikasil, but if you want optimum performance and to straighten out so it's like new again, that's the best way to do it. But that's very expensive. We just had to buy all new diamond stones. It was a lot of money.
Oh, wow.
We have $100,000 in different stones, just diamond honed. So it's $100,000 minimum. But I think to replace them in today's currency would be $200,000 to get all the diamond honing stones to do it. Plus the machine's very expensive. Plus you got to make custom carriages for Powersports because these things are made for car engines. So realistically, if you want to get into this game, it'll probably cost you $300,000 to $400,000.
What is going on here? What's up with that line?
This is the scan of the cylinder. So it's saying that we have taper here. So how the cylinder is.
So this is actually the way that the cylinder wall looks.
Yes, exactly. And then the machine, the goal here is to make it straight it up the cylinder and make also the cross edges with 45 angle, which we have here, like the angle that we choose for it.
So is this inside the cylinder or is this outside or what are these?
This is the top of the cylinder ring travel here. This is a 4-stroke. This is a U cylinder in very nice shape. Probably, I think it had about 150 hours on it. So if you look at the Nikasil, it looks in wonderful shape. Your typical, no gouges, no scratches. However, now that we put the machine in it, if you look at the screen, it's showing that this cylinder is very tapered and very bumpy. So obviously by eye it looks perfect, but under the computer and the microscope it's showing that it's not. So what this machine is going to do, it's going to make this line perfectly straight. It's going to straighten out the Nikasil. It's going to take out the high spots, and we're only going to take off approximately a half thou from this Nikasil.
Man, this thing is, how does it measure? How does it know that?
That's a really great question, and it actually senses by the pressure on the stones. It does a couple passes first, and it can sense where those pressures were on the stone, so that's how it knows. Pretty amazing, yeah.
All right, let's see how it works. Oh wow, so you can see that line moving as this machine is doing its work. Oh wow.
And you can hear the pressure on those stones. You can hear it squeaking.
Yeah.
The amount of pressure you need on those stones to cut that Nikasil with diamond is tremendous. So guys that have a little hand when they're using the stones, they're not using near the pressure this machine is to cut that. So right now it's sensing some high spots at the bottom, so it's sticking to the bottom to get this line straight.
We're gonna check the cylinder now and see how it looks.
Oh yeah, let's look at it. So this is what I'm always looking for when I do it by hand.
You can see the wear in the cylinder. It's definitely lower than the top ring mark, which is not great. However, in this case, we're going to be okay, and here's why. We're using a forged piston, so we're going to be taking out a thou total, which will clean it up perfect. If we were using a stock cast piston, I'd say this cylinder's no good because it's got wear under the top ring. So technically speaking, you're going to lose a slight bit of compression. Is it usable? Yes, you could. You're not going to notice much difference. However, to do it right, I would consider this cylinder too worn. However, we're putting the bigger piston in, so we solved that problem. Now, how thick is this Nikasil? It's 4 thou thick. We're only going to take off a thou.
So that's the wear right there. So that's the top of the ring travel, and I can just feel that with my finger.
Now, Chuck, I want to show you, we actually had a custom hand-honed made with diamond stones.
Sure.
I will show you that, but I'm going to tell you something that we learned from it. We can't get the pressure on the stones hard enough to cut it. So it shows you how much pressure you need. So one of the reasons or the things that you brought up, Chuck, can you cut it with those new stones that are out there? You need the severe pressure still. So that's one reason why you couldn't cut more than a thou after an extended period of time. You need a lot of pressure to cut, a lot of pressure. So this is a specialty made, handmade hone with diamond blades.
Now you can, when you buy these stones typically for aluminum oxide or silicon carbide or whatever, like this looks normal to me. How was this made?
The former owner of Mongoose machine made it. He was a genius. It still is. Making MacGyver. So he basically took these diamond stones and he had them bonded to an old set of shoes or whatever you want to call it.
How old is this piece of equipment right here?
That's a good question. I think he made that. He probably had this before he had the CNC Rottler machine. So my guess would be previous 2018. That Rottler machine adds so much pressure, we find that this is extremely slow. However, it's very useful for making a crosshatch between rings. So this is something that can be done to improve from a stone.
So if I wanted to hone cylinders at home in my shop, I could potentially make one of those if I wanted to spend the money on those diamond stones and on this pressure hone.
Absolutely, it's very possible. Now, to answer the question, how well does it work? I don't know, because we always use our machine.
Okay.
I've used it on some machines just to put it in, to do a couple passes to see visually the wear before I give it to Lucas, who's our CNC honer. I'll use it for examination purposes, but I've never gone all the way to clean it up because it's very slow moving.
And we certainly don't have that magic line like you do on the Rottler machine.
Exactly. And also, we're not going to take out the taper, we're not going to get the outer roundness, so it's going to be a little more primitive than the machine, obviously.
Now, I know that this costs about $600 because I looked it up the other day, because I've often wanted one of these, and I've never really been able to justify it. What are those diamonds worth?
Well, that's a great question. So when we purchased the shop, the former owner said there's about $100,000 of diamond stones in the toolbox. That's used. So now obviously we got a little better deal now, but my understanding, if you were to replace all these diamond stones for the CNC machine, because we have coarse ones, we have fine ones, medium ones, different size heads, my understanding is you're talking about possibly a couple $100,000 easily for all the stones. We have a toolbox full of stones. These are all diamond. All diamond bits, different sizes. These are the holders, correct. These are holders.
These are like the inserts.
These are the inserts that go into the heads, correct.
Wow.
And these are the holders.
And each one of these, each set of these is probably like a couple grand.
I wouldn't say that much. My understanding is a set, so you got 4 stones heads, you got 6 stone heads. They could be, my guess is around the $1,000 mark, somewhere around $1,000. But remember, to do this, you need lots of different size stones. This is for smaller board, 50cc, 85cc's, you need the smaller heads. And these are all diamond stones too. And then, of course, we have the large ones like this for the big bore stuff. And then what if you want to do a 250cc, YZ or KX, now you're into the diamond stones here. So we're actually at the mark. Now it's ready for a forged Wasner piston that will expand a little more, and plus this guy rides hard. Now we do not have any marks on the ring line, so we just have our top mark where the top ring stops. This has no effect on reliability or performance. Before, when we had lines or marks under the ring mark, that in theory you would lose a little bit of compression, but now we are not, so we are good to go.
So basically we would have 2 options here. Yes. We could replate that if the customer wanted, but if he doesn't want to spend the extra $500, whatever, to re-Nikasil,
right,
because we've been able to hone it, he's going to get practical life out of this thing for another whole cycle.
Oh, without question, this has zero effect on reliability or performance having a mark above your top ring line. Zero effect. I could have a chunk out of there and it actually wouldn't make a difference. But if you're the type of customer that you want perfect, and all you can think about is that mark in the cylinder when you're riding, and there are those guys out there, then replate it. Yeah. So there's 2 types of customers, and we do whatever you want.
Now we're going to talk a little bit what happens when your cylinder comes in for Nikasil plating. This is kind of the dirty end. Well, what are we doing here?
Okay, the first step when a cylinder comes in and it's all gouged up and it needs to be replated, the first step is we're going to wash that cylinder in our beautiful parts washer, and then we're going to dry it and we're going to take it out, and we're going to hang it up on here, and we're going to dip it into this acid, and it's going to eat the Nikasil or nicasil right off it and not eat the aluminum. So this is why when you send in a cylinder, you have to remove all the steel, all the studs, all the power valves, all the washers, the drain bolt for the coolant on the side. Any steel will be eaten by this. It will not eat aluminum.
Wow.
It will only eat the nicasil. So why do people say, well, why did you charge me $150 to take apart the power valve and the studs? This is why, because there won't be anything left after this.
So what if I stick my hand in there?
Good question. I haven't tried it. This cylinder came in, customer said, can you hone it and clean it up?
Oh yeah.
We still have some marks under the top ring line. Now you could have some oil seeping by there. But more importantly, if you look on this side, you can see even more wear, and you see some wear down at the bottom. So
you honed this one to diagnose it?
Correct. And we took off the maximum allowable, and we still have a mark. So we have a low spot. On this particular engine, you would burn a little oil, so we're not doing it. So this one's no good. So here's what we would do. All the steel is removed from this cylinder. We're going to take this cylinder and we're going to remove the Nikasil or nicasil. And how we're going to do it, I'm going to show you. We've removed our steel. Now we're going to remove the Nikasil from this cylinder, and we're going to basically dip it into a secret sauce.
It's not nitric acid at all.
Well, it could be. Okay, so we're going to leave that. We're going to leave that in the bath. In about an hour to an hour and a half, we're going to remove it, and the aluminum will not get eaten by nitric acid, only the Nikasil or nicasil and any steel that's left on it. So after an hour and a half, we're going to pull it up, and we're going to have an aluminum bore. So this has gone through the process. As you can see, it's a aluminum cylinder with no steel, no liner, no steel liner, and no nicasil. So now, once we remove the Nikasil or nicasil, we're going to see big gouges in here possibly. What we'd actually do is fill that in now with weld, hone it to size, exact same size, but if we have to take out more honing and the bore is bigger, we will make up for it with the Nikasil, new nicasil. So we're going to add, if we take off a thou, because we had to hone it a thou bigger to take off all the welds and the lines and the damage, we will make the nicasil thicker to compensate for that.
So there are two really important things that I've learned are critical to solving any problem effectively. You gotta have theoretical understanding of what you're doing, and then you need to have practical life experience. Dana told me the story about how Jay, the original owner of Mongoose Machine, started on the path to learning how to replate cylinders. That was a long time ago, and before he did replating, he already had a long career of being an engine machinist and problem solver. Now there's a lot of theoretical and technical information that's required to do plating successfully, as Dana and his team have been learning. Jay took chemistry courses at the university, he read books, he talked to people in the industry that he knew, and ultimately he paid a lot of money for what the guys refer to as the plating Bible. That's part of the reason why plating in Nikasil has been such a secretive part of the industry. It's been extremely expensive for those who are doing it to be able to tool up and get the actual knowledge and understanding that they have in order to do that. Now, as you already saw, it's extremely expensive just to get the tooling to do Nikasil, and that's part of why Dana and his team are open to giving out some of this knowledge and understanding. Starting a Nikasil plating facility from scratch is really not financially possible. No matter how much work you did, you would never recover. Fortunately, Dana has purchased the business from Jay, and it would not be possible without Jay helping them along and passing down some of the incredible knowledge that he's gained across a long career. Now, Nikasil plating is just a tiny little part of it. As I said, Jay was an engine machinist long before he started doing Nikasil, and that's also part of the things that Powersports Engine Solutions, formerly Mongoose Machine, is able to offer as a service. What's this machine over here?
This is the most important machine in the shop.
Okay. I don't even know what it is. I have
Well,
no idea what it is.
as a mechanic, I was a car mechanic for a long time. And do you know why I quit? I got quit because I got sick of the grease and being dirty. That's why I got into motorcycles. They were cleaner, they were better, less grease, less dirt. So the first thing you do is we put the parts in here to be clean. So this is a big dishwasher for car parts, or car engine parts. You put the parts in, you take it out, it's clean and grease-free. Hence why we don't wear gloves in here, see?
Dana just said something really interesting. He said nobody ports anymore. Not a lot of shops that I walk into where they have a Fordham tool.
Well, that's a great question. So as for porting, very few people are asking for porting anymore. It's all computer designed. The computers are minimizing the amount of metal they're using. You can't improve them a whole lot. You can, so very few people ask for porting. Most of all these tools, we use them every day, is for chamfering ports. It's for grinding down the Nikasil before we put it in the hone, because Nikasil is very rough when you first coat it. And it's extremely rough, actually. It's as rough as a stony beach. So we have to take the tools and grind it down before we put it in the honer so we don't ruin the honing stones. Just so you know, it takes about 3 hours in total labor to take a cylinder, strip the Nikasil off, recoat it, grind it, and chamfer it, and final hone it. About 3 hours of labor. However, it takes most shops 2 or 3 weeks to get it done.
I see a tool over here that I don't see very often. I don't have one of these.
Grinding?
If you have
It is a
something
ring rod, but I've never used it.
Yep.
I do it a different way.
How do you do it?
Well, here's the thing. So Jay, the former owner who was doing this 45 years, said up until 6 years ago and earlier, you rarely had to touch the ring gap on rings.
Oh, we've had this conversation. I love this. This is crazy.
So in the last 6 to 8 years approximately, the ring gaps are off for whatever reason. We don't have the answers. Back in the day when you check the ring gap, after you do a proper bore and you have the proper measurements, the ring gap was pretty much bang on almost every single time. However, recently, you got to do almost every ring now. So now I don't use that ring machine. I do it by hand. It takes some time and really do it, but without question, You have to check the ring gap far more than you ever had to, and I don't have that answer why.
Now, the moment that I walked into that shop, I immediately got excited because I recognized a lot of the tools that were back there, and I also recognized the amount of skill and experience that it takes to run those machines effectively. Before Jay retired, I used Mongoose machine for my plating and a lot of shop services as well. I was shocked when I heard that they weren't going to be doing plating anymore. Since that happened, I've been sending my cylinders all the way across the country or even into the States to solve my plating problems. Now, of course, I'll be using Powersports engine solutions for my plating going forward, but there's also a lot of exciting things that they're doing that hopefully will help bring the old school plating and machining stuff into the modern era. One of Dana's goals, for example, is to have plating done within 4 to 5 business days. For those of you that are used to waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for your plating, that's really exciting. Another one of Dana's goals is also to make plating affordable, and he's got a really creative way of trying to make that happen. His idea contains multiple facets. So first off, he started a YouTube channel. You can check that out, Powersports Engine Solutions. I'll put a link to it in the description. Once a week, he's sitting down and making a bunch of YouTube videos. They're very short, they're very to the point, and he's going to be building a library of how-to videos, very similar to mine, no fluff, straight to the point information. Dana's a mechanic just like me, and it drives us nuts when there's a 10-minute video on how to do a 2-minute job. Now, going hand in hand with that, Dana's created the Mongoose Kids Club. He's going to be bringing in a whole bunch of interesting celebrities and talking with them about their experience with their first dirt bike. He's going to be giving away motorcycles, bicycles, all kinds of cool stuff there. But also really interesting, he's got a whole bunch of businesses on board that are going to be offering significant discounts to anybody who is a member of the Mongoose Kids Club. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description as well. One of the most exciting things for me is that if you're a member of the Mongoose Kids Club, you're going to get 15% off all the shop services, including plating at Powersports Engine Solutions. They're also offering in-house financing for bigger jobs if you need it. What I'll be doing is offering a discount to the TrueTech community for anybody who is a Mongoose Kids Club member. What I'm going to be doing is offering a discount to my TrueTech community. So if you join the Mongoose Kids Club, you're going to get a discount on the TrueTech community, basically a 2-for-1 deal.
So this is the Rottler boring machine. We still bore cast iron, old school cylinders, not as much as we used to. However, some people say, hey, can you put a big bore kit in my KX85? So what we would do is we would actually take the Nikasil off, bore out the aluminum cylinder, a couple millimeters bigger, and then recoat the Nikasil on, and so you got a big bore kit. We wouldn't just hone the aluminum. You can't hone aluminum, it would clog up the stones. So you got to bore it. So we still bore cast iron and we still bore aluminum cylinders so we can recoat them for bigger pistons. All these are for V8s, by the way. I don't know if you know that. All this tooling made for whether it's the CNC honing machine, all the way at the modified for Powersports with diamond and different carriers, the boring machine, facing the cylinder heads, all this stuff was made for V8s. If these companies made it for Powersports, they wouldn't sell enough and they wouldn't last. So you have to adapt big V8 machines to work with Powersports. So I want to talk about this. This is the Rottler machine that does the cylinder heads. I'll tell you what the difference is. There are some engine machine shops still out there.
This is what people would typically know as a Surdy. It's a Rottler instead of a Surdy. Surdy is just a brand name.
Yes, correct. But here's the difference between ours and the ones that are still in the shops out there. Typically, the motor rebuilding shops in Canada or the US, they're just rebuilding diesel motors and V8s and some small stuff. The difference is we have the ability to do small valve guides. We have the ability to cut small cylinder heads. Whereas if you take your 4-stroke dirt bike head to a machine shop, they're going to say, well, we only can do big valves. So we have the tooling to do all the small valves, all the small seats. We can cut small valves. We have all the tooling for small stuff. And that's really what Powersports are. They're small, intimate engines, high performance.
Something that a lot of people might not know, when you take your tiny, tiny little thing to an automotive machine shop and they don't have 4.5 or a 5.5 millimeter pilot, what are they using to cut those seats?
Well, typically, from my experience, customers tell me they won't do it. And they say, we can't do it.
What I've seen a number of times is when an automotive machine shop doesn't have the proper tooling to do it, and I get a head back or I see a head that has come from a shop like that, I see new way cutter marks.
Right. That would be the only way to do it, unless you go buy all the small tooling, which they won't.
And you can do a nice job with a new way cutter if you know what you're doing.
Right.
But it's not a gimme.
Right, exactly, 100%.
Yeah. I don't have one of these. I wish that I did. I don't do heads every day, all day. Like, that's a specialty tool right there.
This makes it much faster. So if you're doing an RZR head, RZR 900 Polaris, and you got 8 valves or 16 valves in some cases, this will make it much faster. Bang, 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 you slide over, bang, 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 bang. This was one of my favorite things that I loved the most when we first got the shop, because it really sped it up. I used to do on my kitchen table with those single ones, and mark up my table and basically spend all day doing it and losing a keeper here and there. Yeah. Well, these are small reamers, because a lot of the guides you get are rough and you got to do them. So we have all the small tooling to do all the guides and machine them and ream them, and we have literally every size possible for super tiny valves.
How often do you do valve guides versus cutting seats?
That's a great question. So I'm going to tell you right now, from my experience, is 80% of the time it's the exhaust valve guides that are worn. Very rarely do we do intake. It's extremely rare. So we'll change the guides. Cutting seats, I asked Jay about these. He says, I always cut the seats to make sure they're perfect. Now, these days, you don't have as much meat to cut anymore. So we try to cut them as little as possible, but we clean them up very mildly, and then we put the new valves in. So are we changing seats a lot? It's very rare nowadays. It's very rare. I'd say bad guides, I'd only see 15% of the cylinder heads we get, which is very, very low.
When you get heads in, how often do you find that you see evidence of valve seal leakage?
Great question. I know from experience, because I'm an older guy and I grew up with my, whether it was older guys or uncles say, oh, you're burning oil, it's got to be the valve guide seals. That is more of a 70s or 1980 and pre, because the rubber wasn't very good in the 70s and 60s. That was a common problem. Nowadays, when there's burning oil in a small motorcycle engine, it's 95% of the time, or that's coming through the cylinder. Whether it's got wear on the cylinder, the piston rings are worn, whatever the case is, a scratch, it's 95% of the time coming in through the piston rings. However, we change them every time.
What I always think about when I talk to customers about this issue, because you're right, they say, oh yeah, it's probably valve seals. British engines, a lot of them don't even have valve seals.
That's correct. Well, they didn't have very good rubber in the 70s. That's the bottom line. And also, the rubber became very brittle, so people think, oh, the rubber seals have hardened up and they're brittle. But ever since they come out with Viton rubber, that's very rarely the case. Okay, so we get these cylinders in cylinder heads, we get them in all the time. Dropped a valve, major damage, it actually cut through the seat and the head. We will actually fill in, this one was the same thing. We're not done this one, but we filled in the welds, and we're actually going to recut the seats, and we're going to put new seats in it.
Oh yeah, you can see here.
It's going to be reshaped after. This is very rough. We just did the first hand grinding on it.
Yeah, you can see that that's weld there.
Correct. So we'll actually weld the head and put it back together. And why do we do that? Because this head is very expensive. Even on eBay, you're going to pay $1,500 for the head, and it's probably going to have worn out valves. So we'll fix them up. It's a lot easier than finding a used one these days. And if you want to buy a new one, it's on back order, and it's $2,200, and it doesn't come with valves. So sometimes the best way is to fix the cylinder head. We'll do it. We'll do it. As crazy as it sounds,
You're going to fix that?
Fix all that and make it look like this. This is step number one, and when it's done, it's going to look beautiful.
I see a bent valve here. What do you think about the difference between stock titanium valves and kibble white valves?
Well, my personal opinion is go for the heavier stainless steel valves that are a little more reliable. That's my opinion, unless you're a racer. I think, I don't know what it is, Chuck. What do you lose, 200 RPM with the heavier valves?
I don't know that.
I think it's 200 RPM. I could be wrong. But we always suggest, unless the customer, we do what the customer wants, but if he doesn't know and he's asking our advice, we say, put the stainless steel one in, they last longer.
It's something that I've wondered about a lot. I've talked to several different head guys. Some head guys are nervous about putting stainless steel valves in, even when you put the appropriate springs in. Some guys seem to be okay with it. I've also seen some head guys, I'm not a head guy, I'm not an expert at it, so I like to get everyone's opinion. I've seen some head guys who say that the kibble white valves are quite brittle, and instead of getting a bend like you would see with this one, you'll get a fracture and a break.
You're right. I think that's a valid point. I see more breakage on the yeah. I don't have the answers on that.
Yeah.
But I know one thing: the stainless steel valves, they don't go out of adjustment. They last a lot longer. That's all I can tell you from my experience.
So in your experience, with all of the engines that you've seen and that you're doing here, like say how about in a 450 motocross bike, where it's seeing a lot of RPMs, But it's not somebody who needs to, make every 1/10 of a second count on a lap.
Right. The reason why these are race bikes. Any motocross dirt bike, KX or YZF or whatever the case is, they're putting in these light valves because they get a couple hundred more RPM. That's my understanding. I know that you get a little lower RPM with the stainless steel because they're heavier. The titanium ones get a coating, and what happens is when that coating wears off, it starts to just sink like this one. Look at this. This is actually an extreme case valve.
Yeah, I see that's an intake valve.
You got it. And why do intake valves wear more than exhaust?
I want to know that.
Really? 90% of the valves that are worn in the heads that come in are the intake. It's very obvious. And we're talking about dirt bikes and ATVs. It's because they're sucking in dirt into the intake, and valves spin very slowly as they're moving, and it's the dirt from the intake that wears them out.
I see that all the time. That's why I knew it was an intake valve,
Yes.
because of the wear. Exhaust valves get pitted.
They get pitted, yes. All I know is that 90% of the valve wear is intakes, and it has to be from dirt. It's never on street bikes. It's only on dirt and ATVs, and I never see an intake valve worn on a street bike. It's always the exhaust valves that are more worn, but the intakes are fine. And you're right. It's not so much that the exhausts are worn, they're just pitted. But there's a lot of heat, so I think that would be it. So it has to be from the intake coming in and dirt. And I don't care, how great your filter is or how clean it is, you've got to be getting dirt through those.
Nothing's perfect.
Nothing's perfect, especially on an off-road dirt bike. As for the Nikasil or Nikasil conversation, we get cylinders in like this. Broken spigot, broke right off, major damage, the connecting rod broke, major damage, cracked. We will actually fix this cylinder. We will actually do about 80 passes of weld, build up the spigot, put it in the lathe, clean it all up, grind it, fill in this weld. We're going to fill in all the scratches inside with the welder, bore it, hone it, and then put Nikasil on it and make it look just like that one. People say all the time, oh, I threw out the cylinder, it was garbage. But the truth is, this is like a 1998. Sometimes you can't get that cylinder. You can't buy it new, and they're hard to find used. We'll fix it. We'll fix it. We can fix anything. Obviously, it's case by case. Is it worth doing? Can you find a used one? Obviously, finding a used one is the best case scenario, but there are some cylinders that are so hard to find, we will fix it.
I mean, to the untrained eye, this looks like a complete basket case. Even the boost port back here, it's wrecked.
We would actually fill that in and take a mill and mill it out. In the extreme case, if you couldn't get the cylinder, we'll fix some rare stuff. That's a Mazda rotary engine. This is actually from a RX-8. A lot of people say this is the most reliable motor ever made. Many people say it's the worst motor ever made. As a rotary engine rebuilder, because I think I was the second guy in Canada to rebuild these. I worked for Mazda rebuilding them. We would take all the used motors, take them all apart, rebuild them with new and used parts to keep the warranties in check with Mazda. And I will tell you right now that this is easily the most failure-prone motor ever made.
So I'm generally a pretty slow adopter when it comes to trusting new businesses or new services for engines that I'm going to be sending out to my customers and using myself personally. One of the big questions that I had, and one of the reasons that I went down to Vancouver to hang out with Dana and the crew at Powersports Engine Solutions, was to see, do these guys know what they're doing? I'm very excited to say absolutely yes. There is no way that guys could run a shop like that and do the things that I watched them do if they didn't have a lot of experience and understanding and competence. Having the support of Jay, who's been doing this since the beginning, is also a massive plus. And it's also really exciting to see that they're innovating and pushing forward and trying new things in order to improve the value that they're offering to their customer base. It's extremely rare that I encounter somebody, even in the industry, that has the kind of knowledge and understanding that I see from the guys at Powersports Engine Solutions. That kind of depth of knowledge only comes from people who are absolutely immersed in the powersports industry. These are guys that love what they're doing. Dana's big into vintage RD 350s. He's got some super cool bikes. I'll be putting some of that out on Instagram, on YouTube Shorts as well. So click the link in the description, follow Powersports Engine Solutions on YouTube, join the Mongoose Kids Club. You already know what to do to follow me. You can find me on Instagram as well. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching.